This week, the FDA walked something massive back, while pharma walked a whole bunch of stuff forward at JPM 2026. And in the meantime, there's a state out there that thinks that they know better than patients when it comes to sourcing the medications to treat their chronic disease. And somehow, in the middle of all this, patients, the people that this affects the most, are expected to just stay quiet and go with the flow. We ain't doing that this week at OnThePen. Welcome back to the OnThePen podcast. Let's get started.
Welcome to the OnThePen podcast with your host, Dave Knapp.
Welcome back to the OnThePen, the weekly dose podcast for this Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Compound. And if you're on the pen, then this is where you can go for trusted, patient-centric obesity medicine news that will empower you to have better conversations with your doctor. It's what we do each and every week as we run down the news, not only just reading you the news stories of the week, but telling you what it means for patients and empowering you to have those better conversations so that you hopefully have better health outcomes after you visit the doctor's office. So let's get into it with some housekeeping this week, because I want to let you all know that some of the main feedback that I got on the podcast last year was that there were too many programmatic ads running on the audio version. I want to let you know formally that we have cut ties with the programmatic ads. So the only ads that we will have on the podcast on the audio platform moving forward are the ads that I read out loud, like our sponsors like Shed. So if you're looking for obesity medicine and looking for great treatment and some coaching, all sorts of support products around your obesity medicine journey, check out Shed. You can check them out at otplinks.com. There's a link there. You can use code OTP25 to save 25%. Listen, if you're struggling with the disease of obesity and you're just looking into these treatments and you don't know where to begin with our friends at Shed. They're the ones that allow us to do this here at OnThePen, and we're so grateful for them. But story one is very interesting. Is this just happened today? So the FDA actually announced that they were asking Novo and Lilly to remove suicidality warnings from their GLP-1 products. So the FDA requested the removal from Wegovy, Saxenda, and Zepbound based upon an analysis of 90 plus placebo-controlled trials. Imagine how many people have been involved in 90 plus placebo-controlled trials for these medications that all showed that there was no increased risk of suicidal ideation, anxiety, or psychiatric adverse events found. That is an astounding number. It seems like that warning comes with just about every single medication that is on the market. So the fact that the FDA is actually moving to ask them to remove that warning is quite interesting. The investigation began in 2023 due to some post-marketing reports. I think that this originated over in the UK, where their government has taken a little bit different stance than they have here in the United States and the FDA. The concern came from anecdotes, post-marketing data, reports from doctors and patients, not actual clinical trial data. The diabetes version of these drugs have never carried these warnings at all, for interesting context. So this is the FDA essentially saying, we're going to go off the clinical control trial data, and we're going to ask that you remove that because they believe that there's been plenty of clinical trial data to show that there's no increased risk for suicidality with GLP-1 medications. That is a really interesting change. I know that one of the topics that we've been talking about here at OnThePen over the last couple of weeks is my own specific journey with anhedonia, and that is sort of this loss of pleasure. And so we do know that these medications, especially GIP medications, which is sort of why this announcement is intriguing to me from the Zepbound tirzepatide perspective. We have 20 years of data, including clinical trial data and post-marketing data on GLP-1s. We don't have that for GIP medications. And so one of the things that I find interesting is that they haven't said anything about differentiating between GLP-1 medications and GLP-1 plus GIP medication. So I know that many of you have struggled with anhedonia. Have you struggled with any sort of issues, mental health related, that weren't positive? I think most people tend to report that their changes in their mental state have been positive. But I know this could definitely be a controversial move by the FDA, and I'm super interested to see what we hear from the community on this one. So that news just came out today.
Ben got a new supplement that was, supposed to like help him get rock hard abs, and it has ashwagandha in it. He was like nervous about taking ashwagandha again because that's exactly how he felt. He had some serious anhedonia on that.
Yeah, Hambone is saying that her husband experienced some anhedonia taking ashwagandha, which is something that I've also heard can be a thing with that specific supplement. So I'm curious if you all have any experience with ashwagandha. That's definitely an impactful thing to deal with is that anhedonia. And I know that I've heard many even providers who are on the internet talk about their patients in the real world having experience with that. So that'll be definitely one to watch a little bit more closely, because I do believe that GIP is acting in the brain in a different way than GLP-1s are. And we'll be watching that one closely. Ro has some interesting announcements this week, with Amgen announcing a research collaboration on access to GLP-1 medications. One of the phrases that we use all the time around here is, all of the medical advancements in the world mean nothing if patients cannot access them. And we know that Ro has done a lot in terms of developing tools for the community during the shortages to help find their medication and help to report shortages to the FDA. We know that they have developed an insurance checker tool. So this partnership with Amgen is a research collaboration focusing on real-world barriers to GLP-1 care. And what they're looking at specifically together is insurance coverage gaps, prior authorization failures, why eligible patients still can't start or stay on treatment, and why this particular class of medications seems to be different than other medications in terms of how insurance companies deal with them. So it's using real patient behavior, which is what's unique about this partnership. It's using real data collected by Ro, millions of coverage checks for patients looking for GLP-1 coverage. So it's not policy or theory. This is actually data and real lived experiences reported to Ro by patients, and then partnering with Amgen to basically take that data and make sense of it. Now, Amgen does not yet have a marketed GLP-1. We know that we've talked a lot about MariTide. Now, MariTide is a long-acting GLP-1 receptor agonist that couples with it a GIP receptor blocker. Now, if that sounds kind of weird, that's because it does the opposite of what tirzepatide does. Tirzepatide binds to the GIP receptors. MariTide blocks it, but with similar weight loss efficacy. Now, what's yet to be seen about the Amgen product is definitely more in terms of side effects and how people stay on the medication, but we'll get a little bit more into that in just a second. But the fact that Amgen is studying this shows that they have a pretty strong confidence that MariTide will make it to and compete well in the market. So they're studying access before the launch of future drugs, which could help simplify access once MariTide does come to market, because Amgen will have unique insights. And it could also help to optimize some of these broken systems when it comes to insurance, so that we're not completely relying on just the cash pay systems alone as a way to get drugs into the hands of patients who need them. So this will be worth watching carefully. Now, kind of going down the MariTide rabbit hole again, the conference that's going on out on the on the West Coast right now, I think it's out in California, the JP Morgan Chase conference has brought with it a few interesting headlines from some of the CEOs of these companies that are either have GLP-1s on the market or have GLP-1s that will soon be on the market. Amgen is one of them, and their CEO was talking about MariTide and claims that patients actually maintain their weight loss with MariTide for up to 2 years, which is really important nuance considering the fact that all the GLP-1s on the market to date have shown pretty much the obvious. In fact, it seems like the more powerful the weight loss mechanism of the drug, the more quickly the weight rebound is when patients go off the medication. So this is interesting if it holds up. Obviously, we need a lot more data to support that, and we need to know about tolerability, dosing. But this appears to be patients who are on the extended interval dosing, and so that is one of the key mechanisms of MariTide. The fact that you can take it once a month, or even some patients are being dosed once a quarter in these clinical trials. So it could be very interesting to see if MariTide weight holds up. Now, again, I said earlier that MariTide actually blocks the GLP-1 receptors instead of binding to them. So that, coupled with potential monthly or quarterly dosing, could allow the drug to stay in the system, obviously, for a little bit longer, maybe help the body to not have such a rapid response to its quitting the medication. But we're waiting to see if the tolerability part of this MariTide story matches up with, what we're hearing about patients maintaining the weight loss, because none of this is going to mean anything in the real world if the drug is not tolerable for patients to stay on. And we know that one of the things that sort of magical about tirzepatide is the fact that patients report having been on straight GLP-1 receptor agonists, that the GIP that they experience with tirzepatide sort of helps allay some of those emetic issues, like diarrhea, vomiting, some of those other less savory issues that can come with incretin therapies. With blocking them, perhaps you may see an increase in some of those emetic issues. So we'll have to watch that one closely. And that we will. It's a good reason to make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. And if you're listening on the podcast, train your algorithm by leaving us a 5-star rating and review, and let it know that you like this content so that you get it as we put it out there. Now, this is another interesting headline out of JP Morgan, because we had an interview with Lucas Montarce, who is one of the executives over at Eli Lilly. And he said in an interview with Bloomberg that Lilly's orforglipron, which is their oral GLP-1 that's supposed to contend with oral Wegovy, is now tracking towards approval as early as Q2 of 2026. Now, this is interesting because we have heard all along from Lilly that this would be a Q1 launch, early 2026. Now, as early as Q2 takes us all the way up to essentially June. If technically it gets done in May, it's still being done in the second quarter of this year. And so that's very interesting. So hopefully it doesn't take that long. The interesting thing about orforglipron, if you don't know about it, it's the first in class GLP-1 pill, because it is a small molecule pill, whereas oral Wegovy, which launched a couple of weeks ago, is actually a peptide. So a lot of rules about how you can take oral Wegovy. We made some content about that. I hope you'll check it out if you're considering starting that pill, because there's some things you need to know before you waste a bunch of time, money, and have a bunch of extra heartache for starting that medication. If you want to check that video out, you make sure you go back to our YouTube videos and find that video about Wegovy. But it's a first-in-class small molecule is orforglipron, which means it's absorbed easier. So there aren't a whole bunch of rules about taking it. But I think what we'll see, and what we may potentially see along the way, is some additional FDA scrutiny over orforglipron, because it's a small molecule, because it's actually metabolized in your liver instead of being metabolized in your stomach and absorbed into the bloodstream that way. It is very interesting to note that there were some major ALT elevations in some patients, not very many, but in some patients in early orforglipron trials. I mean, we're talking 10x liver enzyme numbers. And so those could catch the attention of the FDA, because, as you may know, orforglipron being a small molecule, the only other small molecule GLP-1 to make it a decent amount of way through clinical trials was a drug called danuglipron. And danuglipron was a drug that was developed by Pfizer, and they had to abandon it because of liver toxicity issues. So you could expect the FDA to scrutinize the orforglipron data pretty closely, and I hope that they do. And you could ultimately see, and this is something that nobody's really talking about who talks about this stuff, but we've been talking about it because it's definitely been on my radar ever since the drop of the the phase 2 data on orforglipron, you may see the FDA do something like require liver enzyme testing before starting it and during the medication treatment period. You see that with other drugs that are on the market. Some drugs you have to get your eyes checked. Some drugs you have to get your livers checked or your kidney function. There's all sorts of things that can come along with an FDA approval that are required as part of the prescribing regimen. Now, that would be devastating for Eli Lilly, right? Because you're talking about something then that telehealth companies who Novo just super successfully rolled out the Wegovy launch with some of the major telehealth companies out there. It'll be available from Shed this week. If you want to check out our partners at Shed, go to otplinks.com. You can get access to a prescription through there or even through your primary care provider if they're providing care for your obesity. But this would be damaging to Lilly in a major way, because if they required liver enzyme testing for orforglipron, most telehealth companies are not built to offer that level of care. I mean, many would probably figure out a way to do it, but that would add a barrier and definitely friction to the patient experience and sort of take away from one of the, I would say, things about orforglipron that make it attractive, and that's that it's quote unquote easier to use. Well, is it easier to use if you've got to go get liver enzymes checked throughout the year to make sure that your liver is functioning properly? I don't know. Something to watch, and we'll be watching it here at OTP very closely. So we'll see what the FDA comes up with, but Q2 now is the target for orforglipron, not Q1. So you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer if you're looking for orforglipron. Now, one of the interesting things that happened to OnThePen this past week is we were reached out to by the folks at change.org. And I just wanted to highlight that we'll be making a video for change.org today that'll be going live on their social channels in the next couple of days. So I hope that you'll give them a follow and interact with the videos. I'll definitely make sure to share it to our link tree at otplinks.com once it's live, so you can go there and comment and let them know that you appreciate them amplifying this for us. But there's federal compounding legislation that we have opposed at our change.org petition available at otplinks.com, really because this bill will serve as a messaging bill to a bunch of state legislation that's going on right now that can severely thwart compounding. And so it's important to oppose this legislation because right now, all of the legal battles that Lilly and Novo have waged against shutting down compounds have failed. And why have they failed? They've failed because the law is written in a way that allows for it to happen. It allows for it to exist. Patient necessities in terms of alternate dosing or alternate formulations that are not available from the commercial versions of the medications allow for these to be made when there's no shortage. And of course, when there's a shortage, they can be compounded and made as copies, right? And that's happened all along with GLP-1s. The status quo has been very good for compound medications. Now, this law would open up some, let's say, legal loopholes for big pharma to exploit. Now, if you're curious about why I may be leaning towards believing that that's what this bill is intended to do, look no further than the fact that it was introduced by two representatives from the state of Indiana, where our good friends at Eli Lilly reside. Their corporate headquarters resides. So I don't trust this bill. There's stuff in there that really, my biggest pet peeve about it is that it sort of creates takes good actors in the compounding space and turns them into bad actors instead of actually having overt language in there that goes after bad actors. And that's where I immediately get skeptical of the intention of this bill, which was named the Safe Drug Act of 2025. And so it's hard to argue with something that's called the Safe Drug Act. But when you look a little bit closer, peel back the layers, you start to see that this is part of a legal battle and a legal game to shut down compounds. Couple that with some of the legislation that's going on in the state of Florida that seeks to really make it so that compounders would have to get their API essentially from Lilly or Novo, which they're never going to play ball on that. And so I just think that we need to be loud about this and we need to oppose it. We need to let our voices heard and be able to show the world essentially that we have agency as a community. So if you want to jump over, go to our link tree, sign that, and look for these new videos popping up at the change.org petition. This federal bill will definitely act as a catalyst to accelerate state legislation, and we've got to oppose it. So if you are somebody who relies on compounds, I was talking to my friend Sabina of GLP Winner just yesterday about my frustration with this. It seems like I care about this maybe more than even people who are on compounds seem to care about it. but we're going to fight this battle because it's important for a great number in our community, the people in the middle who don't have good insurance coverage, who don't have millions of dollars to of disposable income to, pay cash for whatever medication they're on. The people in the middle rely on compounds. And I think that's probably most of you out there. And so I think that it's very important to protect the sanctity of this compound industry. And I think that it's extremely important that we oppose this legislation.
Dave, you guys have created meaningful change in the past. Like, this is something that this community has done and can do. And it's like people are looking for little things they can do in their life to actually create meaningful change every day. And like, this is one of those opportunities. And it only requires minutes, to make a huge change in the lives of other people. Right.
If you look at, so Hambone is just bringing up the fact that as a community, we've done a good job of showing our agency. The Release the Vials campaign be, one of the biggest examples of that. We've really helped to reshape an industry and expand access as a community by getting loud. And this is just sort of the next phase of that battle in protecting access to life-saving medications for people. Now, on the topic of compounds and on the topic really of CEO saying interesting things at JPM 2026, the CEO of Novo Nordisk, Mike Dustar, basically, admitted he thinks that there's up to 1.5 million U.S. patients that are using compounded GLP-1s. He acknowledged that compounders understood consumer needs before Big Pharma did. That is exemplified by their rollout of the Wegovy pill, which was unlike their rollout of any of their medications prior to. And who do they leverage? Well, the telehealth. Why? Because telehealth offers a frictionless experience to patients and helps especially patients who are in primary care deserts get access to treatment for their chronic disease. And he said it's not because these patients want unsafe, what he calls knockoff products, but they want that frictionless access. And so he's sort of agreeing that they had a real market failure in terms of approaching the marketplace and meeting patients where they were. I think Novo's done a really great job of adjusting, and you see that the new CEO Dustar has done a good job, sort of partnering with telehealth companies to bring the Wegovy pill at a price point I think that is definitely more respectable than what they brought Wegovy to the market for originally. I still like to see it come down a bit more, but you're seeing some massive shifts for sure. 1.5 million people is definitely more than they were more than they were calculating just a few months ago on their earnings call, when I think that they said around 1 million. I think it could even be more than that, to be honest with you. It depends on if you're talking about how many people are currently on compounds or how many people will use compounds this year. If it's how many people will use compounds this year, it'll be much more than 1.5 million. I'm fairly confident of that. So major admission there by Novo Nordisk CEO that they sort of missed the boat on reaching patients where they were at, that the compounders did a better job. But he's also saying they're going to continue to aggressively go after compounders. And you have to look no further than what they're doing in the state of Florida. That bill, if you read it, is definitely a bill that was, influenced by Novo Nordisk. There's no doubt in my mind. This is obviously a personal opinion and not actual facts that I can point to. But the fact that Novo Nordisk has time and time again referred to compounded versions of semaglutide as being a less safe option because of the way that it's manufactured, that is definitely what's baked into this bill. Essentially, semaglutide compounds are manufactured from a chemical process, whereas the pharmaceutical versions, the branded versions of semaglutide are manufactured from a yeast-based recombinant process. And so they're basically saying that because they're processed and manufactured differently, that they're not the same and therefore shouldn't be allowed to be compounded. Now, if they're successful in setting this precedent here, you could see Wegovy fall back into shortage this year because they have a Catalent plant that may get shut down by the FDA. If that happens, all bets are off with semaglutide again because they won't be able to keep up with demand. And then the 503Bs can ramp up their production again of semaglutide. Some of them have never stopped, to be honest. And so the interesting thing is, if they can set precedent before that Catalent plant gets shut down, could they thwart even the mass compounding because the FDA makes a move based upon legislation in different states? I don't know. It's just a very interesting landscape that we'll have to watch unfold over the next couple of months and the next year or so. to see sort of where this thing goes. And finally, one of the interesting stories of the last couple of weeks is the fact that Oprah is launching a GLP-1 book in tandem with a endocrinologist that helped to write the book. All very interesting. The book is called Enough. If you want to check it out, I'll link it in our otplinks.com so you can check it out on our Amazon affiliate links. But very interesting conversation happened around the promotion of this book with Serena Williams. I'm going to link the video to this as well in our OTP links link tree, because this is a wonderful conversation about obesity. And I love Serena's story. I love the fact that she acknowledged that the one enemy that she couldn't defeat was the disease of obesity. And it's just a fascinating conversation. So I want to play a little clip of this for you so you can get a flavor of what it is.
To me about that. Why everybody loses differently.
Yeah,
I know somebody that just started. They lost
Yes.
a female who lost on the lowest dose.
Yeah.
Lost 13 pounds in 1 month.
Yeah.
That is highly unusual.
Very
Yeah.
I hear that there are super responders to
That's
this
right.
medication,
That's right.
and there are low responders.
That's
There are
right.
some people who respond really, really strongly to it, and other people
That's right.
don't.
And that's because there's different types of obesities. There's not one type of obesity. There's different types of obesities. We just haven't figured out.
I had the tough
You
type.
have the tough type. You have the tough, but you responded, which is really
Yes,
wonderful.
yes.
And likely what happened with you is you probably needed a higher dose.
So that is an interesting conversation. It's just so interesting to see the mainstream conversation that Serena sharing her story has opened up. It's interesting to hear the Oprah podcast talking about what we've been talking about for 3 years, right? And saying some of the same things that we're saying for 3 years, talking about the quieting of food noise, talking about slow responders and super responders. I think this is just so great for people, because I think that the word is going to get out much faster. You know, Oprah will hit tens of millions of people with one video that has tons of nuance, whereas it takes us a full year of work to hit that many people, right, on many different platforms. And so her using her platform to really shine a light on this, I love it. I think it's great. And I love that Serena's out there sharing her story too. So I hope that you found this podcast helpful. If you did, leave it a 5-star rating and review, hit the thumbs up. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being the best part of what we do. Couldn't, wouldn't, and shouldn't do it without you. Until next week, we'll catch you on the next one.